Picture this. It's 2030. The once proud British Empire reduced to a foggy island of disillusionment. Big Ben's hands have stopped, frozen in time like the nation it once represented. But how did we get here? Grab your umbrella and a stiff upper lip, because we're about to take a jolly unpleasant stroll through the dystopian decline of Britain. But first, let's rewind a bit. Our story begins in the peaceful days of the mid-20th century. Britain had emerged victorious from World War II, battered but unbroken. The sun never set on the British Empire, and the future looked as bright as a freshly polished crown jewel. In 1945, the newly elected Labour government, led by Clement Attlee, embarked on an ambitious programme of social reform. The National Health Service was born, promising free healthcare for all. It was a time of hope, of rebuilding, of looking towards a brighter future. Fast forward a few decades, and things were still ticking along nicely. Sure, the empire had shrunk faster than a wool sweater in a hot wash, but Britain was reinventing itself. It was the swinging 60s after all. The Beatles were revolutionizing music, Mary Quant was raising hemlines, and British culture was taking the world by storm. But it wasn't all peace and love. The 60s also saw the beginning of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, a conflict that would cast a long shadow over British politics for decades to come. It was a stark reminder that even as Britain tried to move forward, the ghosts of its imperial past were not easily laid to rest. Beneath the surface, trouble was brewing faster than a pot of Earl Grey. The 1970s brought labour unrest, economic troubles, and questionable fashion choices. It was as if the entire nation had collectively decided to wear corduroy and sideburns as a form of self-punishment. The 1970s saw Britain earn the unflattering nickname, the sick man of Europe. Inflation soared, unemployment climbed, and there were power cuts so frequent you'd think the whole country was playing an elaborate game of hide-and-seek. The winter of 1978 to 79, dubbed the Winter of Discontent, saw widespread strikes that left rubbish piling up in the streets and even the dead unburied. It was like a preview of our dystopian future, only with more flared trousers. Then came the 1980s, and with it, the Iron Lady herself, Margaret Thatcher. Love her or loathe her, and boy did people do both. Thatcher's reign was like Marmite spread over the nation, divisive, strong-flavoured, and leaving a taste that lingered for decades. Thatcher's government embarked on a programme of privatisation and deregulation that reshaped the British economy. Traditional industries like coal mining were decimated, leaving entire communities adrift. The miners' strike of 1984 to 85 was a bitter, year-long struggle that epitomised the divisions of the Thatcher era. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. The Big Bang deregulation of financial markets in 1986 turned the City of London into a global financial powerhouse. Suddenly, it seemed like everyone was a stockbroker, yuppies were sipping champagne in shiny new wine bars, and loadsome money became the catchphrase of the day. Of course, we all know how well unfettered capitalism turned out in the long run. But hey, the 80s were fun while they lasted. The 1990s brought a brief respite. Cool Britannia was in full swing. Oasis and Blur were battling it out on the charts. Trainspotting was showing the grittier side of British life. And Tony Blair's new Labour promised a third way. It seemed like Britain had found its mojo again. Spoiler alert, it hadn't. The 90s gave us Britpop, girl power and football almost coming home in Euro 96. It was a time when wearing a Union Jack dress wasn't considered a political statement, and when Brit Award ceremonies were more about the music and less about not offending anyone. We were living in a wonder wall, convinced things could only get better. Music becomes more ominous. As the new millennium dawned, the cracks began to show. The financial crisis of 2008 hit Britain like a double-decker bus, leaving the economy more mangled than a plate of jellied eels. But the real kicker was yet to come. The 2008 crisis exposed the fragility of Britain's financial system. Northern Rock, once a stolid building society, became the first British bank in 150 years to suffer a bank run. Suddenly, those queues weren't for the latest iPhone, but for people desperately trying to withdraw their life savings. It was like a very British apocalypse. People were panicking, but still politely waiting their turn. Enter Brexit, stage right. In 2016, Britain decided to do the political equivalent of ordering the most exotic dish on the menu without asking what's in it. The result? A national indigestion that's lasted years. The Brexit referendum split the country down the middle, turning dinner tables into war zones and making family WhatsApp groups more volatile than the FTSE 100. Suddenly, Everyone was an expert on trade deals and the Irish backstop. It was like the whole country had binge-watched Yes Minister and thought they could do a better job. The years following the referendum were a masterclass in political chaos. We went through prime ministers faster than Spinal Tap went through drummers. Brexit became a national Rorschach test. Everyone saw something different in it, but no one could agree on what it actually meant. Now you might be thinking, surely it can't be that bad? Oh, my sweet summer child, let me paint you a picture of Britain in 2030. Imagine a land where the pound is worth less than a Freddo bar, where the NHS has been replaced by a Hunger Games-style competition for medical care, and where the only growth industry is the manufacturing of keep calm and carry on posters. The weather, of course, remains reliably terrible. But now, instead of being a topic of polite conversation, it's more like a metaphor for the national mood, gloomy, with a chance of existential dread. The coastline has shrunk faster than a politician's promises, thanks to rising sea levels. Brighton now boasts beachfront property in Crawley, and the white cliffs of Dover have become more of a gentle slope. The only silver lining, we've finally solved the housing crisis in London. Turns out underwater properties are quite affordable. In the cities, AI has taken over most jobs. The good news? No more Monday morning commutes. The bad news? The dole queue is now longer than the line for the last Greggs vegan sausage roll. Even the Queen's Guard has been replaced by robots. They're just as stoic, but their hats are now fitted with anti-drone lasers. Tea, once the solution to all of Britain's problems, is now rationed. Citizens are allowed 1 cup per day, 2 if there's a national emergency. Unsurprisingly, there's a national emergency every day. The black market for Yorkshire tea bags is thriving, and there are rumours of a secret society of Earl Grey enthusiasts meeting in abandoned tube stations. The class system, always a British favourite, has evolved. Now it's not about your accent or schooling, but how many Twitter followers you have. The royal family has been replaced by a rotating cast of Love Island contestants, chosen by public vote every fortnight. Buckingham Palace has been turned into a giant escape room where participants try to find Britain's lost global influence. And perhaps most tragic of all, England still hasn't won another World Cup. The phrase, "it's coming home," has been officially classified as hate speech. The FA has resorted to training footballers in the noble art of penalty kicks from birth, but somehow we still manage to lose on penalties in every major tournament. Politics hasn't fared much better. After cycling through every possible combination of coalition governments, Britain has resorted to governing itself through a complex system of passive-aggressive post-it notes and strongly worded letters to the Times. The Houses of Parliament have been converted into a theme park where visitors can experience the thrill of making terrible decisions that affect millions of people. In the countryside, things are equally dire. Farmers have been forced to diversify, turning their fields into massive solar farms to power the nation's ever-growing number of kettles. The Lake District has been renamed Puddle District due to chronic underfunding of flood defences. And Scotland? Well, they finally got their independence, but plot twist, they immediately applied to rejoin England when they realised how much it would cost to relocate Nessie to an independent Scottish loch. So, how did we get here? Well, it's a perfect storm of factors: political short-sightedness, economic mismanagement, and a national tendency to pretend everything's fine while the house is burning down around our ears. We spent years arguing about the colour of our passports while the rest of the world raced ahead in technology and green energy. We clung to our past glories like a pensioner clutching a Werther's original, unable to accept that the world had changed. Our political system, designed for a bygone era, creaked and groaned under the weight of 21st century challenges. On the global stage, Britain's influence waned faster than its empire. We went from rule Britannia to, excuse me, could you please rule a bit quieter? Our attempts to punch above our weight on the international scene started to look less like boxing and more like an embarrassing dad dance at a wedding. But wait, before you start planning your escape to Australia, spoiler, it's mostly underwater now, there might be hope yet. Britain has always had a knack for muddling through, for keeping calm and carrying on. It's a nation that survived the Blitz, for crying out loud. Surely it can survive its own self-inflicted wounds. Perhaps this dystopian future isn't set in stone. Maybe, just maybe, Britain will do what it's always done best: adapt, evolve, and come back stronger. After all, a nation that can produce both Shakespeare and Love Island clearly has range.